consumption is about 13.5 billion gallons per day. Our summertime consumptions generally average about 35 billion gallons per day. So you see that during the summertime, like most cities, a big spike or increases for the irrigation portion of it. Hence, the brown is in Midland. It's people, the newspaper goes around, and if you have a green lawn, it's kind of the assumption that you're not following the conservation plans or the stage 2 plans in Midland. And so I made sure that my grass has died, and trees and bushes are dying in my yard, and make sure that we don't do that. We entered into stage 1, which is really voluntary restrictions in Midland, back in April. It was really very voluntary, and it was 3 times a week, and we didn't have any enforcement. July 1st, we went into our stage 2, which is twice a week, mandatory water restrictions. The big drop where we had about a 4 million gallon per day drop in consumption on that. So from voluntary to mandatory is making a difference in Midland. Biggest issue we have right now is enforcement with most people that have sprinkler systems, and they set their sprinkler systems to go off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I don't have code enforcement officers out at 2 o'clock in the morning determining whether somebody's complying with the restrictions or not. So we're trying to do, unfortunately, surprise attacks or sneak attacks at night, and trying to get that voluntary compliance. And I've been called the water Nazi or water czar, depending on who you talk to, but it's our main goal is to, we've been setting some limits with CRMWD, and it's our main goal is to stay under those limits as much as we can. So our long-term issues are, we do have what's called T-Bar, which is a ranch that we own out in Winkler County, which is about 70 miles west of Midland. It's got about 550 million gallons of acre feet available water. The problem is getting that water from Winkler County to Midland. Back in 2005, the engineering study was done, and it was determined it's about a $140 million project to get that water from one spot to the next. So Midland can't afford on its own to do that size of a project. Hence, we want to team up and look at regional alternatives for our water use. You know, we might be bitter enemies on Friday night when we get the gridiron with one another, but at the end of the day, we're all West Texans. We want to make sure that if San Angelo, Abilene, the other communities out in West Texas have an issue with water, that we regionally come together and try to hit that source. And I use the example in my community is a big puzzle. And Midland has pieces of the puzzle, San Angelo has pieces of the puzzle, Abilene has pieces of the puzzle, CRWD has pieces of the puzzle. And at some point in time, we all got to step back and look what is the big picture in West Texas for water, and how can we maybe use some of Abilene's and San Angelo's and Midland's pieces of the puzzle to put together to complete that big picture for West Texas and address those water concerns. So that's what we're doing with the 3 communities. We hope that we can have some of those big picture items and alternatives and solutions that we can take back to our councils and say, here's the projects that we need to do to address those long-term needs. Last thing is, I always tell my residents in Midland will always have water. There will always be available water for Midland. The question is going to be, can we afford that water? And it's going to be an expensive, costly task to make sure that we have that water, but we will have that water.
Hi, I'm Dominguez, City Manager, San Angelo, and these guys really covered everything, so I think I'm just going to go straight to the questions. When we look at San Angelo, what we're dealing with now, we're really taking an immediate approach to the water issue that we have at hand, and then we have more of a short-term solution, and then we're looking at the long-term solutions. When we talk about the immediate issues and what we're doing as a community, the one thing that has really been in all of our media outlets is the fact that we are adjusting our drought conservation ordinance. We're a little bit different from the other communities in that we are in a drought condition throughout the year. And so what we call our conservation stage, we actually only allow watering twice a week during the summer months and once a week during the winter months. And so we're in that on a regular basis. We have recently moved to the stage 1 level of our plan, and that is watering once a week. And then when we move into the winter months, it'll actually be watering once every 14 days. Now what we've done in conjunction with the councils, we've had extensive discussions on actually tightening up that ordinance. And so as we continue looking in the future, we're going to bring the new ordinance back to the council so we can put it into play. And some of the adjustments that we're making is we've actually, in terms of when the financial penalties engage in terms of excessive water usage, we've lowered those thresholds. And so for an example, on a residential side, if you don't have a separate sprinkler meter, that's going to kick in at 45,000 gallons. If you have a sprinkler meter just for irrigation, that's at 35, and that number was at 60 and 70 before. So we are actually bringing our financial penalties into play earlier. We're also going in and really defining the days that people can water. We've had our drought plan for several years, and one of the things that it allowed us to do is it essentially said you can water an area once or twice a week or once a week. What we had is we had everyone in the community watering at different times, and so it really made enforcement difficult, and we were having a hard time getting a handle on that issue. And so we're going to actually move in terms of watering days per address. And that's going to allow us, I think, to be a little more proactive on the enforcement side and get a better handle of what we have in the community. And so we've really gone through and made a number of adjustments to try to tighten up our ordinance and take a more proactive stance. As a bit of a history, San Angelo was often criticized years ago as being one of the worst cities in terms of water usage. And we've actually drastically reduce the amount of water that our citizens are using on a per capita basis. And we're really happy that now when a lot of folks talk about drought contingency plans, they talk about the SAWS or the San Antonio water system, and we're seeing the San Angelo water system in play in those discussions because of the changes that they've made. And so that's what we're working on immediately. The water supply project that we're working on in the short term is actually the Hickory Water Project. And that has gotten a lot of attention recently, some positive and some negative. And so we've been trying to deal with those issues as we continue moving forward. We have accelerated the pace of that project based on the drought conditions that we're seeing. We have the well field in design. Actually, the well field is being bid out now, and we're hoping to bring that to council for award within the next month or so. The design is being completed on the transmission line, and we're going to put that out for bid within a month. And then early next year, we're going to engage in putting the treatment processes out for bid. Now, one of the things that we've actually done on the treatment side is we've slowed that down a little bit, because as we started looking at the economics of treatment processes, we were really moving with a filter process to remove the radiation from the water. But what we've seen, the numbers are starting to change for us, and reverse osmosis is actually becoming a viable option in terms of the long-term operating costs. And so at a recent city council meeting, the council has directed staff to investigate that option, begin testing. And what we're trying to balance on that project is you have the upfront capital costs that are very important, but you also have to be mindful of the long-term operating costs associated with that project. Because if you make the wrong decision, you can pay a lot of money in operating that system. And so we're really trying to get a perfect balance in terms of how we operate it. The Hickory project's a little different. We've all talked about wanting to work together, but when the water associated with the Hickory aquifer was adjudicated, we had some restrictions put on the city of San Angelo, and essentially what it means is that we cannot sell that water to another entity, and we cannot use that water to replace water that we sell to another entity. And so that project is really a city of San Angelo project, and we have to deal with the restrictions that were placed on us by the courts, and then the permits that we have for the wells. The advantage that we have in that project is that it is adjudicated and we do have those rights, and so we can continue moving forward, because what we're seeing statewide now as folks are moving in to underground systems is they are getting locked up in a pretty tense legal battle in various areas, and so we feel like that's an advantage for us. As we look long term at what we're trying to do, we really think it's embedded in working with the other communities. One of the things that I think we all have to keep in mind in terms of West Texas, and this is not a Compton Valley or a big country issue or even a Permian Basin issue, is that there are some very large groups that are looking for water. SAWS, we know that they're actively looking for water, and we know that they've been in West Texas looking for opportunities. You have the LCRA that's looking for water, you have Austin, you have Dallas. And so we also think that it's important as communities that we work together and really represent a West Texas interest as we continue moving forward in the water discussion. Because there will be a time when we have to face those larger systems and their desire to find water. And we really think that one of the big benefits of the three cities coming together is to really position ourselves to handle those issues in conjunction with the CRWD. A lot of folks are saying, well, if the three cities are talking together, what does that mean for the smaller communities? I think one of the things that we've talked about is we really need to get the three cities lined up in a way where we can move forward, but we really fundamentally see this as a project that is something where all small cities in the area are going to work with us as we continue trying to find water solutions. The last thing that I want to do is actually thank the Water Development Board, and I know Representative Darby and Senator Duncan had a lot to do with the Water Infrastructure Fund that we received recently. That was a $120 million project. So Courtney, we completely feel your pain on the cost of these projects, and Larry. But what the Water Infrastructure Fund what it means to San Angelo, and really what it means to all the communities in the state, is that the interest rate that we got was 1.36%. If we were going to go out in the open market, we were probably looking at something around 4.25% to 4.5% in today's market. That is over an $80 million savings to the water customers in San Angelo. And so we really feel that that program is very important in the state of Texas, and it's important to all of our communities as we continue developing our water resources and we work together.